see a lot of entrepreneurs just being too random. They're guessing and hoping and wishing. And when you look at the people at their elite, the elite people, entrepreneurs, they're doing a lot of due diligence. They're being intentional and strategic and thinking things through and doing research. And I see that you take your craft very seriously. And I love that. So what do you tell the entrepreneur that's just starting out that maybe isn't taking it as serious and doing a little more emotional focused things and guessing? Did you ever make that mistake, or do you see the scariness of doing that at a young age and how that multiplies to a business that doesn't scale?
Yeah,
I guess that's a tough question, but
no, I have an experience with this. So in my first business, my production company, I'm 3 years into it or so, and I decided, hey, I'm going to get an office in Manhattan. I'm going to do all these things. I'm going to hire these employees. And man, I just wasn't prepared for the reality of what having real overhead is like. And so this is like the early to mid 2000s. And all of a sudden that caught up with me. And so that was the guessing game of, I just assumed, oh, this is easy. Great. I'll just hire some people, get some office space. Sure. $3,000 a month, $5,000 a month, whatever. That's cool. We'll figure it out. Bad mistake. And it put me in a position where, at least it felt this way, where I woke up and I'm personally $250,000 in debt. I'm 2 months behind on rent. There's an eviction notice on my door in the Upper East Side of Manhattan, and I am renting out my own apartment to some stranger on Craigslist and asking him if I can sleep on the couch. It put me in that position, and it took me a long time to get out of that. And the cool thing is, I didn't go bankrupt. I paid everything off. I got out of debt. And actually out of that was the biggest lesson I could have ever had. It was the best thing that ever happened to me. But as that, it was really about not, what led to that was not doing due diligence, was not doing the math, was not understanding, what do I bring to the market? Not really understanding my customers, not really understanding what it actually takes in business to be successful. And so if you're just kind of running and gunning it, it's very easy to feel like you just wake up one day and you're in debt and you're behind and stuff's not going to work out because you're not actually calculating it out. With the caveat, I will say this one thing though, and I think this is very important because it's also very easy to stop yourself from making progress by spending too much time measuring and doing due diligence. I think it's a balance of, once you feel like you at least understand 75% of what you need to know, take action. Don't try to know 100%. You never will, and you'll probably get a lot of things wrong anyway. So when you get to go like, yeah, I feel like I at least get the idea. I understand. I feel like I get about 75% of the info. Just go, what am I going to do? Now make now go with your gut and make that decision to take some action.
You're firing me up, because when you said that was the toughest time of my life, I was in debt, I had 250, but out of that came the biggest lesson. And we talked about it yesterday, how hungry you are. It wasn't from an easy past, it was from challenges. And when I look back at my past and my breakthroughs, when I was dead broke, when I had no choices, when I was frustrated and discouraged, the reason I'm hungrier now is because I never want to go through that again. So it's interesting that our toughest times in life, the biggest sacrifices, the biggest pain is what develops that hunger to push forward. So looking back, are you glad you went through those tough times and you went through that part of your life where you maybe were in debt and you were frustrated? Do you look back and say, this is what kind of shaped me?
I mean, let's be honest. I wish I could have had not had to experience all that, but I will say, I learned more from that experience, from living on a couch, from being totally debt broke, almost going bankrupt. I learned more from that experience than I could have ever learned by reading a book, by being in a class, by somebody giving me advice. And so that for me also, and just like you, clearly you are a purebred entrepreneur. That's the difference, because I've also seen people you're probably going to end up in a position where maybe it's not that extreme, but it could be a potential. And what either happens if you're a purebred entrepreneur and you have it is, you either wake yourself up, you pick yourself up by your bootstraps and you figure it out and you solve it, or you just stop dead in your tracks and you give up. And the people that go, it's just happened and I lost the money, or I lost the business, or I almost did, and it just wasn't right for me, that's not a purebred entrepreneur, and that's okay. But I think people really need to test themselves and ask themselves a tough question of, not if, when I get into a position like that, how am I going to actually act? That's the difference.
Huge. I love it. So Satya asks, my question for Brian is, for entrepreneurs who are stepping into a positioning campaign, what is your number one tip to launch a digital marketing campaign. Would love to hear your thoughts on kind of the process of creating a successful campaign as far as the outcomes and what you're thinking about.
Yeah, so obviously it's pretty broad, broad question about having the details of the business, but this is what I would suggest. I think that, what people forget sometimes is who their actual customers are. It's so easy. And I think marketing especially, everyone goes, oh, here's a story I want to tell. Now, where should I go tell it? I should do it on Facebook, or maybe if I'm old school, I think it should be on TV. But where the real win is not starting from that. It's starting from who are our core customers and what customers do we want more of, and who are those people and what are their values? And if I told, what do they need to hear from me for them to go, yes, I want to go back to Bolt. I want to go back to this other company. I want to go back and buy more. What do they need to hear from me in order to do that? And that requires understanding your customer, having conversations with them, looking at the data and going, great, now that I actually understand, I'm not saying what do they want, because that's difficult too, because you don't want to just listen to them and do exactly what they want. You want to give them better. They don't know exactly what they want. But if you understand their values, what drives them, why do they come to you? Was it for the customer service? Was it the value? Was it the price? What's the thing? What's the thing that they go, yes, this is why I love Bold. This is why I love XYZ company. Now focus your attention there. And how do you make that better and bigger? And how do you tell a story around that? That's where real successful marketing happens. Then once you have that figured out, now you go, great. Where are these people spending their time? Is it Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, radio? Where is it? I mean, I can pretty much tell you the enemy demographic is Facebook, Instagram, digital. But at the end of the day, you really actually need to understand, because sometimes, and I've had clients where they get the value of digital and they're ready to, and they're spending hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars on, let's say, Facebook ads. But you go, hey, did you know that you might as well just go sponsor this other podcast, because your entire exact audience is there and you can talk to them for 5 minutes. You can be interviewed on the show, and that's going to be way more effective and efficient. And then send them somewhere to get a free product and then remarket to them there. You can actually save a bunch of money and be more effective. So it's actually asking, like, where do people spend their time? So it's starting with your customer before you get to the tactic. And I think most marketing starts with, what's the tactic? What platform should I be on? And how do I, what's the cost per lead I should have, and it's backwards. It starts the other way around.
Why would they come to you? That's a huge one. And something I heard a while back that sticks with me too is your customers are marketing geniuses. If you actually listen to your customers and you market to what they want versus guessing, that's the game changer as well. And where are they spending their time? I hope you guys are conceptualizing and, more importantly, writing these down and making sure you're creating an action plan around them as well. Kevin wants to know, for you, what's been your most successful marketing campaign and why?
Oh man, I'll give you one quick recent example, and I'll work backwards to a slightly bigger one. A recent example is we did a bunch of content around a company called Inglot, which is a makeup company that Jennifer Lopez was actually launching her new makeup line earlier this year through that company. We created content with Jennifer. She put it out on her channel, and every time we put a piece of content out, it would take down the websites. Like, they just couldn't keep up the back end, and the back end infrastructure was massive. So that was really cool to watch, because it was, yes, obviously her namesake and her celebrity drove a lot of it, but it was just so engaging and connected her to the product in a cool way that really spoke to her and her audience, that just so much spikes in traffic, it just wasn't able to be handled. I'll go back further and give one other example. There was this company, Jackrabbit Sports. They're still around, but this was before they got purchased by the publicly traded company. This is when they were this is going back many years ago, like 7, 8 years ago, when they were private, 5 locations here in New York City, and we were their agency. And what's cool about this is this was before Facebook was necessarily the tactic that it is today. So I would do some tactics differently. But what we did, and what we knew that is the same then as it is now, is we said, hey guys, they said, how do we tell our story different? How do we get more people in the store? And I said, stop making it about you. Stop making it about what you're selling, and stop making it about what you do. Start making it about your customers. And so we ran a campaign. We called it Run for the Rabbit, where we actually casted real runners in New York, had like 300 or 400 of them come in, sit in front of the camera, talk to us to find out who could we train for a marathon for 6 months. We documented the whole process, did it for charity. So a bunch of money, like hundreds of thousands of dollars donated to charity. And it became so successful for them. They grew, they ended up selling to a publicly traded company a handful of years later. And still to this day, I'll see people, they're like, oh man, remember the Run for the Rabbit campaign? It was such a big deal to the New York City running community that people still talk about it. That was 6 or 7 years ago.
What I'm hearing is it's just unique, thinking about marketing in a different way and putting the customers first. I love that, those two ideas, and I'm sure you have a lot more. If you were to think back, just kind of in a broad sense, Brian, when you would look at your top 10 marketing campaigns, what would you say are like the similarities? Just like the top couple where you're like, this is why these top 10 succeeded. Was it like they were unique, or they really focused on the customer? They had this aspect. Can you kind of and I know this takes obviously some thought, but is there any similarities that you see in all top marketing campaigns you've done or that you've studied?
You know, I think there's a couple of things, right? Because I can't just lump them all into one group. So I'll give you a couple. You know, one is, yes, having a very different message that stands out. Like, that's important, right? Because, and you can, and I was actually on the Yahoo Finance podcast and a bunch of other stuff this last week when Nike did that ad with Kaepernick. And regardless of where you stand on the politics, and that's not my discussion, and I'm not, you know, talking about that side. If you look at that and you say like, okay, like, do they understand their customer? They're talking to a very specific piece of their customer, but they're not talking to everyone. You know, did it have some call to action or a deal or to get, you know, a bunch of free Nikes? No, it's just a statement. And they rode the press, the PR wave. And so it just stands out. You can hate it. You can like it. You can be totally neutral on it. But at the end of the day, they did something that absolutely stands out and grabbed attention. Good marketing. That's one bucket. The other bucket I would say are the ones that truly know their customer and stop making the marketing about them and make the marketing about what happens to a customer when they use their product. Or be inspiring, be aspiring, really show your customer and what happens for them, not what you have and what your product does. Stop selling the features, sell the outcome. That's a big difference. You have to understand your customer to actually sell the outcome. And then the last piece I would say is more transactional, but it's still absolutely in some of the top performers, is, are you driving a deal or something that is intriguing enough that the rest of the market isn't? So if you're selling a book, are you selling it $14.99 when everyone's selling it $16.99 and you think that that's enough to get drive people? Or are you giving away all your books for free and going to an event and yes, you're going to grab the most attention? You know, so it really comes down to, you know, how transactional do you want to be? But I think those, if I was to create some categories around in general marketing and what we see, it's those.